I know this might seem a bit random and whatnot, but I felt a little nostalgic, so I wanted to do a little video on sort of my memories from when I was a kid of first getting into Pokemon Generation 1. So this video is pretty much like my Pokemon Generation 1 memories, and it really all came from I was on Twitter having a discussion with Mystic Umbreon, the Pokemon YouTuber. We were just talking about his videos, my videos, sort of memories of being a Pokemon fan. I'm a little bit older than he was, so when Generation 1 first came out, I was in, I think, 8th grade, I want to say. And I didn't really know what Pokemon was. When it first came out, I was collecting video game magazines, and there was some talk of this game, but there really wasn't a lot of coverage right away. It almost became somewhat of an overnight sensation from my perspective anyways. In the late 90s, I really became more of a PlayStation kid. The PS1 really started rocking it, and as a result of that, I still played Nintendo, specifically 64, but I wasn't really too keen on the handheld stuff coming out because you have to understand, before the Game Boy, before Pokemon, the Game Boy really didn't have that much love. I mean, it really didn't. There were a few classic games on there like Metroid 2, The Return of Samus, Super Mario Land, Final Fantasy, I think it was Final Fantasy Legends was on there. I love that game. Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. There were some classics, but really Pokemon took the Game Boy and the handheld sort of, the handheld RPG and the trading and whatnot to a different level, to a whole new level. So the first time I ever remember any mention of Pokemon was they were selling the Pikachu Tamagotchi. And for those who don't know what that is, a Tamagotchi is like a little watch you wear like on your wrist, and it's like a little pet, and you're supposed to feed it and put it to sleep and take care of it. It was a thing that was a big deal back then that really isn't a big deal now. Like, you would take your Tamagotchi with you. I never had one. I thought they were pretty lame. And you would feed your, and they didn't just have Pikachu. They had other like animals, like a dog, a bird, whatever. Not all from Pokemon. The Pokemon one was special, and you would feed it. And I saw one, and I was like, okay, well, what's this? Whatever. Then when I actually got to look at the Pokemon anime, when it had first started airing, I wasn't really sure of what it was. It just was another anime. And understand, you have to again go back to that time period in the late 90s. This is right as Toonami started to kick in. And Toonami had all the hot anime back then. Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball, Gundam Wing. Pokemon was not on Toonami, but there were still other places that had anime. But I had always thought, okay, well, this is some show for kids. Started watching it, didn't really understand. Then I actually saw the Game Boy game for the first time, and I'm like, hey, it's an RPG. And I loved RPGs. Growing up, I was a huge fan of RPGs. It had top-down view, you had HP, you had, skills, you leveled things up. It's a JRPG. And I knew about JRPGs because I was a lifelong Dragon Quest fan. Final Fantasy was my shit. Like, I was a big, RPG fan. So I finally got to look at the game because a friend of mine had it in school. He had a copy of Pokemon Red. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy Pokemon Blue because I figured out how it worked. Like, both versions had different Pokemon, slightly different ones. You trade them back and forth and, you have battles and whatnot. So, I did that. I went and bought Pokemon Blue. And I remember, actually, before I bought Pokemon Blue, I did get to play it a little bit. My friend let me start a new game on his Pokemon Blue. Another friend of mine did. And I know it was pretty cool how when you first start the game, you have like Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. And I picked Squirtle. That was my first Pokemon choice. Now, I actually am a huge fan of the original 3 starters. Not so much, as far as combat goes, even though they're pretty good with the Mega Evolutions and stuff like that lately. I just love the way they look. I have a lot of nostalgia for, Venusaur, Blastoise, and Charizard. And I remember just, picking Squirtle. Because I was told later on that, like, the way it works is Bulbasaur's easy, Squirtle's medium, and Charizard's hard as far as, like, how you want to play the game. Because Charizard in the early part of the game is not as effective as he would be later because of the fact that the first few gym trainers are not weak to fire. It's a rock and a water type, with Brock and Misty. So obviously Bulbasaur and Squirtle would be better. Bulbasaur, of course, being the best pick. And I love Bulbasaur. But I picked Squirtle for my first playthrough. And then when I actually got the game, I bought the game. I already had the old school gray Game Boy. I bought that ages ago. I bought the game and I started playing it. And the thing that makes the game so addicting, I think, for a lot of people is just how many options you have. Even with the first Pokemon, I'm not even talking about the newer ones. We're up to like 800 or so Pokemon. Back then you only had 150. And even that was already a lot. Like, even that was a lot of variety. And any game that gives you a lot of options and variety is usually fun, because then you see other people pick different teams and you have your teams, and you kind of compare and contrast the two. And it was kind of cool to do that. Like, this was the first RPG that I had ever played that had like more than just a handful of playable characters. Because when you really think about it, yeah, you're playing as the trainer, but the Pokemon are the playable characters. You know what I'm saying? And you have 150 options, 151 if you count Mew. And it was a crazy thing back then, because if I wanted a water type and I didn't want to use Squirtle, I could take my Eevee and make him into a Vaporeon. And by the way, I'm making this video assuming that you've played Pokemon. If you haven't played Pokemon, this is not the video for you. This is more so for those who have played it. Or I could always get a Cloyster, or what was a Shelter first. I could always capture like a Seal. There's a lot of different options there, for what you want. Lapras, there's a lot of different options, and some look cool and some look kitty. Like, that was the thing about Pokemon that I always liked is, some of the Pokemon did look like these cute, stuffed animals, like Pikachu. He doesn't look very threatening. Then you have ones like Charizard, the fire dragon, this big fire, salamander, essentially, Charmander. And then you've got this giant tortoise with guns of water in his back. Like, the thing looked cool, bro. Like, it was a cool looking thing. And I remember playing through the game, and I remember in 10th grade, this was in 9th grade when I first got the game. In 10th grade, some asshole actually stole from my 10th grade science class. And I'm sure there's probably some people listening to this who were in that class. I have a feeling. Maybe somebody knows the answer, but some dickhead actually stole my Pokemon Blue, because I had it in my backpack, because I would always play it like at lunch and whatnot, or on the bus. Some dickhead stole it, bro. Like, he jacked it. And I remember it was the end of class. I'm looking through my bag, can't find it, and I'm sitting here holding the class back, like, yo, who the fuck's, like, I was mad, bro. Just imagine. I mean, some of you guys have been there. Just imagine being like a 15, 16-year-old kid, and you got like a red face, and you're like, yo, where the fuck is my game? I'm about to whoop somebody's ass. Because my dad had just got me that game. It wasn't even my money. And I did have money at the time, because I used to sell VHS copies of like wrestling pay-per-views. I used to sell mixtapes in high school. So I had my own money at the time, but it was unfair because my dad had bought that for me. And I was very pissed. And I remember people were kind of laughing at me. I said that I got bullied. I wasn't kidding. And the science teacher... No, it wasn't science. It wasn't science. My bad. It was English. It was English, not science. This fucking... Look, I'm not going to disparage her because it's been so many years, but she was pretty much a bitch throughout this whole thing, because she should have just stopped the entire class and searched everybody, because it's literally stolen property. And it was the last class of the day. We were going to go on the bus and go home, so I had no chance of getting that back. She didn't stop the class. She didn't do shit. Maybe you misplaced it. No, bitch, somebody stole it. And lo and behold, about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, there was a kid who had a Game Boy. He had a copy of Pokemon Blue with it that looked remarkably like mine. Now, here's the thing. The kid who had it was not in that class. He was not in that class. So obviously, whoever stole this game gave it to this kid to sell to me. And me being the sucker that I am, I paid him $40 to buy my own game back. And I'm pretty sure it was my own. Of course, when I got the game back, it was erased. I had to start over again from scratch, which really sucked because I had made some trades with my friend that I had to make again. I didn't have a Game Shark. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have that. I had to trade the honest way. I played the game the honest way. No cheating. And I just funny because looking back on that, like, I was mad about this for a long time, but like looking back on it, like, I guess maybe if things were different, I would have like threatened the kid and been like, "Tell me who gave you this, or I'll kick your ass." So I'm like, I could have done that, but I didn't care. I just wanted my game back. Like, I wanted my game back. I wanted to keep playing. That's how much I was obsessed with Pokemon when I was in high school, and I mean, it was. I wasn't super obsessed to where I was like, to where I had like, you know, posters and toys. I didn't have any of that, but I did love it, and I watched the anime. I didn't watch it. I actually wasn't a huge fan of the anime back then because I used to watch the anime just to see what Pokemon would pop up because I wanted to see like if my favorite Pokemon would be there. Like, when are we going to get an episode with, you know, Rapidash, for example? When are we going to get an episode with Articuno, Zapdos? We got the movie later on, but you know, I didn't like the show. I didn't care for Ash as the main character. I still don't like the show. I never cared about Ash ever. Never cared about Misty or Brock. I felt like the main character, Ash, in the anime was just a lameoid. Like, when he gave up Butterfree, like, it was lame. Like, when he, you know, the whole thing with the Pidgeot at the end or whatever, and the Spearows, he had to give him up. Like, it was just, he was a lame trainer. But I liked watching the show for the Pokemon. I watched it for the actual Pokemon that would appear in it. But I didn't like the show. But still, there were some episodes that I did love, you know, especially when Eevee and Pikachu would happen. I loved the Lieutenant Surge episode, too, because that was a great fight, the Raichu-Pikachu fight. Even though it was kind of dumb that Pikachu never wanted to evolve, but that's another story. So, I remember they came out with Pokemon Yellow shortly after that, and I remember getting a copy of that game as a gift from somebody. So I had blue and I had yellow, and later on I actually got a red version. I've still got my red, blue, and yellow version somewhere in, I don't even know where the hell they're at. They're somewhere in some box somewhere, but I actually really liked Pokemon Yellow. I liked the concept of them taking the anime and kind of making it more like the anime. And I love how in Pokemon Yellow you have access to the 3 starters if you find them in the game. Like, that was a great, great, great feature. Pokemon Yellow is a fun game. Probably the best version of the original 3. But I still didn't like the anime. That being said, though, when the movie got announced, I was there. In fact, I went to go see Pokemon, the first movie, in theaters at an old movie theater that's no longer in Tampa called the Hillsboro 8. And I remember I went to go see the movie by myself. Now, I was 16 years old. This was the first time my parents had actually let me go see a movie by myself. You know, I always go with my dad or with somebody, but they actually dropped me off at the movie theater and I got to go see it by myself. I know nowadays kids go see movies by themselves when they're like 10 or 11. That wasn't the case with my parents. And they were very protective at the time. But it really was a safe thing, and I went to go see that. And I actually liked the movie when I saw it the first time. You know, in recent years, I did go back and rewatch it, and it's really not that good of a movie at all. It's really, really cheesy and really corny. I don't hate it or anything. It's just really, really cheesy. Like, you're sitting there and you're kind of embarrassed when you watch it sometimes, but the Japanese version is definitely a lot more serious. I did get to see the sub version. You know, Japanese Pokemon, which I knew was a thing, but I wasn't that aware of it. The Japanese version of that movie was definitely a lot edgier. It was, you know, the voice acting was better. I still don't love the movie or anything like that. I do have nostalgia for it, but it really is cheesy no matter what. So, either way, Pokemon Generation 1, Red, Blue, and Yellow are always going to have nostalgia with me. And, you know, it's kind of funny looking back because that first game was so glitched out. You know, the big glitch of that game is the rare candy missing no glitch, which was like a thing that all the kids knew about. Were essentially, and I'm sure most of you who were around back then know this, but in the original version of Red, Blue, and Yellow, you could, you know, if you sail alongside one of the islands in the lower left part of the map at the right time, you run into a glitched Pokemon called Missing No, which was just a kind of a fan name, but he had no number. It was just a bunch of glitches. And if you, I forget exactly how you do it, but basically you can clone any item you have. So you can have rare candies, which is what gives you your Pokemon to level up. So you could actually keep doing that over and over again and end up with like 99 rare candies and level up your Pokemon without grinding. Now, this was a cool little glitch in the game that was fixed in later versions. I think Yellow fixed it, actually. But one thing about the glitch is that it actually wound up causing problems because of when it comes to competitiveness. And what do I mean by that? Well, The problem is if you've got rare candies and you don't grind, you can level up all your stuff easier. And thus, when you're competing against somebody and you're having a match, a duel, a Pokemon duel with the two linked Game Boys, things tend to be not unfair. Also, people did have Game Sharks and they did exploit them. I remember the only time I ever had a Pokemon battle, ever, was once in school. I had Pokemon Red. This kid had Pokemon... No, I had Pokemon Blue. He had Pokemon Red. We played. I had my team, which was... I'm trying to remember what my team was. I think it was like Blastoise. I think Nidoking. It's been so many years. I think I had one of the birds in there. It's probably Moltres. And so I went against this kid, and he had 6 Mewtwo's. All at level 100. Wiped the floor with me. And it's like, why would you battle and have any fun battling if you've got 100 Mewtwo's? I'm sorry, 6 Mewtwo's at level 100, which was the strongest Pokemon at the time, by the way. Why would you even consider that fun? Like, you lose. Like you actually end up losing because you win, but you don't get any fun out of it. Where's the thrill in competition? You're just going to wipe the floor with me. And after that, I never had another battle again. Like, I never battled anybody again in the original generations because of that. Like, it was just, come on. Like, you're going to have a Game Shark and exploit your system and cheat, essentially, in battle because he didn't get 6 Mewtwo's by trading and leveling up. He didn't. He used the Game Shark. He even admitted it. So what's the fun in that? I thought it was more fun to kind of have a team that was balanced and kind of go back and forth and, really have a battle. Now, right around this time, also the Pokemon card game was coming out. Now, when I was around 16 or whatever, I used to play Magic the Gathering a lot. Yes, folks, I did play Magic the Gathering back then. I still have my cards somewhere in my closet. And they came out with a Pokemon game by Wizards of the Coast. It was the same company. And I bought some starter packs. I remember buying them. And it was funny because I played maybe 2 matchups of the Pokemon card game, and I didn't like it. I did not like that original Pokemon card game at all. Now, I'm not saying the game it sucks, or I'm not saying that. I just never got into it. Like, I played one matchup. The rules were a bit confusing to me because you had, like, the different status effects and whatnot, and I never really practiced with it. I'm sure if I kept practicing, I would have probably been a better player, but it just never really interested me. Plus, I was really heavily into Magic at the time. I couldn't fit another card game into my brain. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't fit that. Magic was my number 1 card game. Pokemon was not even number 2. So I essentially just dropped it. Also, the Dragon Ball Z card game came out about a year or 2 after that, and nobody played that game. I mean, nobody played that game at all. It was right around that time, but no, I mean, when it came to Pokemon, like I said, it was very glitched out, but I just remember it was very satisfying going up and fighting the Elite Four. I got my ass kicked by the Elite Four the first time I ever went up against them. They destroyed me. Then the second time I went up against them, I got murdered by the dragon guy. The last guy or whatever, he freaking ran through me like nothing. And I just remember, going back, training, and coming back to win. Because I didn't like exploiting the rare candy glitch that much. Like, I did it for a couple of Pokemon just to get them to evolve and fill out my Pokedex. But I really didn't do it, to cheat the game or whatever. I wanted to play the game honestly. And I did end up beating the game. Wound up beating Gary or whatever. Blue, whatever you want to call him. I forget what his name was in this version. And then I went on and caught Mewtwo, with the Master Ball. I loved going after the bonus stuff. I loved going after Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres, and Mewtwo. Going to the different, like the electrical factory, the power plant, and getting Zapdos. So many great memories of playing that. And I just remember, like, how cool it was. Like, how, there were these legendary birds, and then there was Mewtwo. And then you found out about Mew and how you can only get him through, like, game events. I never actually got Mew on my original version. In fact, I don't know anybody who actually did. And I'm not saying that people didn't have him. I know people had Mew. I'm saying I don't know anyone who actually had a legitimate Mew. I saw some Game Shark hacks of getting Mew, but I don't know anybody who actually went to a Nintendo event and got Mew. Back then, I don't know anyone who did that. Nowadays, they give the stuff out, like on, you can download it, you can scan it in with the QR code or whatever, and you're good. But back then you had to go to a special sponsored Nintendo event. I don't even know when they even had these, yo. So nobody that I knew had a Mew, except for the kid who hacked it. He had one. But it was great. I mean, it was fun. And then, you start hearing rumblings about, oh, they're doing Pokemon 2, which was going to be called Gold and Silver. We didn't know that back then. But we had, hints of it. Like, you had Donphan in the first Pokemon movie, and you had Togepi, and you had, of course, Ho-Oh in the first episode, which, I remember when I first saw Ho-Oh, I thought it was a Moltres. In the first anime episode, I was like, oh, that's just Moltres. But then when I saw it again, I was like, wait a minute. That doesn't really look like Moltres. And then, of course, the excitement began for Generation 2, which I might do another video on because I have a lot of fond memories of Generation 2. Really like Generation 2. In fact, I think Generation 2 is probably my favorite gen until Gen 7. That's my personal favorite gen, was Gen 2. Gen 2 did everything right when it came to a sequel, but we'll talk about that on another video. This is about Gen 1. Look, Gen 1 might not have had the coolest Pokemon, but I did love the majority of the designs of the Pokemon in that generation. I really did. The majority of them I loved. I thought some of the designs got really stupid in later gens, like when you started having ice cream cones and keychains as fucking Pokemon. It's kind of stupid. I'm sorry, it's not really an animal. But back then, everything just made sense. You had real animals that were modified into being Pokemon animals. Then you had Aerodactyl was a favorite. I love that idea with the prehistoric stuff. And then you had, of course, Dragonite, Dratini that would become Dragonite, which was always Dragonite was a beast back then, yo. Dragonite was awesome back then. I remember Snorlax was a tank. Same thing with Tauros. That was another one of my favorites. I loved using that. I loved using, if you don't pick Bulbasaur as your starter, I loved using Victory Bell. Bellsprout, whatever. I loved using him. Pikachu was usually on my team, but if not, I would get Jolteon because Jolteon was really, really fast. I was always a big fan of Jolteon. But usually what I would do is, in later playthroughs, because I played through the game a few times, in future playthroughs, I would pick Charmander to make it harder for me. And it's funny because I remember when I was a kid, a bunch of people were telling me, oh man, Butterfree's great. Like, oh, you got to use Butterfree. I never liked Butterfree. I was never a fan of Butterfree at all. I was more of a Beedrill fan. I know I might be in the minority there, but I like Beedrill more than Butterfree. Butterfree was cool, but I just never thought it was that useful. All my friends were like, oh, Butterfree, this and that. I never thought he was that useful. I really didn't. It just wasn't my thing. Beedrill was more my guy. I liked using him a lot. And who else did I use back then? I gotta think. I liked using Geodude, who would become Graveler. Didn't like using Cubone that much. And Kadabra was okay, even though Abra was annoying because he wouldn't do anything. That was annoying. Oh, and of course, Gyarados. Gyarados was my go-to water Pokemon. If I did not start with Squirtle, or even if I did, I would still get Gyarados because he was an animal. When you first evolve Magikarp into Gyarados, he's pretty much your strongest Pokemon if you do it early enough. And I love Gyarados, and in almost every Pokemon game, in fact, I want to say pretty much every one, Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, I'm trying to think which ones I didn't use Gyarados. I think I used Gyarados pretty much at least in every playthrough of every version, I think. I have to remember. He's always been on my team. Big fan of Gyarados. And he, or as I called him back then, Gyarados. That's what I called him back then. Another favorite, always in there. Trying to think of who else I used. I used Machamp, or Machamp, whatever you want to call him, Machop. I used him for a little bit. Always a fan of Hitmonlee, but later on I became more of a fan of Hitmonchan. In fact, Hitmonchan is one of my absolute all-time favorite Pokemon. I love Hitmonchan. Love Hitmonchan. So those are my memories of Pokemon Generation 1. I mean, I can't really begin to tell you how hot Pokemon was back then. It was definitely mainstream. It was everywhere. It's still pretty mainstream. I mean, if I go to Walmart, I can still see the cards and the toys everywhere. So Pokemon is still a big deal. But back then the movies were actually in theaters. And I know that we got some of the recent movies in theaters too for limited runs. Dude, Pokemon Movie 1, the first movie, was in theaters for like a full 5-week run or whatever. I think it was 5 weeks, which is long. And I had great memories seeing it in theaters, seeing the animation on the big screen. I'll never forget those moments. And, it's funny because with Pokemon, I always thought that, like with Pokemon, it was kind of a kiddie thing. But what it was the RPG-ness of the original games that really made me a fan. So that's it for my 25-minute memory lane stroll down Pokemon history for me. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Let me know some memories that you might have, and I'll talk to y'all soon.